looks like to work with these southern sea otters. And essentially, you'll be seeing two different types of behaviors during this training session. And we categorize them in a few different ways. The first round of behaviors that we're looking for are going to be called natural behaviors. So actions that these otters would normally be performing if they were out in the wild. Sometimes that simply looks like what Abby just did. She dove right down to the bottom of the exhibit and returned right back up in front of my animal care staff, Jessica, again just returning to station. Now this allows our animal care staff to really get a good look at our otters, even if it's their mobilities, just swimming around, or really their behavior in general. This tells them a lot about our animals and our animals' mood and maybe status during the training session itself. Now the other group of behaviors, and this is really where we ask our animals to become active participants in their own care here at the aquarium. And so sometimes that looks like asking one of our otters to come up on the rock work or move around, maybe that tactile exam that we saw a little bit earlier that we had when one of our animal care staff was placing her hands on our otter's belly. So this is a little bit different than if you were to go home and give your dog or cat a nice pat on the head, right? These are still very much wild animals, and by asking permission before we actually touch our otters, it really strengthens the bonds between animal and trainer, and also it builds a lot of that trust that is really essential to interact with these creatures. And what you're seeing is that every time that we ask our otters to complete a behavior, they're rewarded with a nice tasty piece of seafood. And what's on the menu today will be some tiger prawns, some shrimp, even some squid and clam's tongue. And now you're going to see our otters eat quite a bit through this training session. And it's all coming from the silver bucket attached to each of my animal care staff's hip. And that actually contains the meal for each individual otter just for this training session. These southern sea otters need to eat about 15 to 20% of their body weight every single day. And to kind of give you some perspective, they weigh about 40 to 50 pounds, right in the middle there. Now I'm not going to have you folks do the math, but it pretty much comes out to our otters putting down about 10 to 12 pounds of seafood every single day. And if we wanted to keep up with them, well, we need to chow down on about 150 cheeseburgers all by yourself in one single sitting. And I'm not sure about you folks, but I haven't quite mastered it yet, but our otters definitely have it down. And now they need to eat so much food because they actually have an extremely quick metabolism. And this is what is a little bit different between these marine mammals and seals or dolphins that have that thick layer of fats called blubber to keep them warm. Our southern sea otters actually have the body fat equivalent of that of a marathon runner, so super, super lean, and it's because of that quick metabolism. And now that really does help them stay warm in the chilly waters of our Pacific coast. Now, not only do they have that quick metabolism generating heat from inside their bodies, but they also do have a very dense coat of fur. It's actually the thickest fur in the entire animal kingdom. They have about 1 million hairs per square inch. And again, just to give you some perspective, your average house cat at home has about 1 million hairs on their entire body. So take all of those hairs, squish it down to the size of a postage stamp, and that's what our otters are covered in. And now we're seeing some really cool actions as we're continuing on with our training session today. Looks like we have one of our otters in our otter spa. It's going to be that little circular cutout to the left of the exhibit there, but you can see inside that otter spa, by looking at our monitors right up ahead, it gives you a little bit of a better view into that space. So you can check out the otter that we have in there. Now really another great opportunity right there in the center with it looks like Kit. So just being able to see these animals completely out of the water is really, really special because normally they spend about 24 hours a day hanging out in the kelp forest canopy of our chilly water that we have off of our coastline. So being able to really see these otters completely out of the water gives you a little bit of a better sense of really their kind of stature, their biology, and of course you can see in there as we had Abby kind of run across the deck, they're not super agile on land, and it's because they really don't spend a lot of their time there. And so again, another tactile exam by Jessica, our animal care staff. They're kind of right in the center. Again, really testing and working with, it looks like Rosa there, or excuse me, Abby. There we go, and another really great behavior over there right on the front of our rock work. Seeing Kit really extend her whole body. So I did mention for you folks that were here when we started the training session, Kit is our largest otter, and you got a really good look at that as she stood up. Now I'd like to share one of my personal favorite things about these otters with you folks. Now they are pretty mischievous. They're related to the weasels, also the wolverines, so they definitely do pack a punch. But you know, these otters are pretty mischievous, and we have to keep them stimulated in multiple ways throughout the day. And so when we had Kit there kind of stand up on her back legs, we got a good look at her entire body. And this is important because our animal care staff sometimes our otters. Now, they do eat hard-shelled food, but we actually don't give them the hard-shelled food on exhibit because they love to slam it against the windows and scratch them all up, which, is really difficult when we want you folks to be able to see them, and of course we want them to see you as well. So they're tool users, so they use those windows, which is not exactly what we're going for. So they receive that hard-shelled food behind the scenes. But these otters, they're extremely intelligent, and they know they're not supposed to have that hard-shelled food on exhibit. And so what they do is they will try and smuggle it onto exhibit. Since they have so much skin that they need to kind of move around to be able to groom every area of their body, they have some kind of skin flaps that form some pockets right underneath their front arms there. And so sometimes they're known to try and store those hard-shelled food items in those little pockets and try and smuggle it back out onto exhibit. So that's a fun little backstory of what we saw there with that behavior we got to observe with our otters standing on their back legs there. Now again, lots of tactile work with Abby right there in the center with Jessica. Now you might have also noticed that we have some other items in our sea otters exhibit. Again, right there up on the rock work, we have some of those little buckets and even some material that we call car wash kelp. Now these are what we call enrichment items for our sea otters. And our sea otters aren't exactly the only species that get these enrichment items here at the aquarium. As you explore today, I encourage you to look into our African penguins exhibit, our seabirds, or even our giant Pacific octopus, and you might find some very similar toys in those exhibits as well. And it's really something that is both mentally and physically stimulating for our animals throughout their day. So just like I mentioned, we try and keep all of our animals really engaged and stimulated throughout their day, and this is one of the ways where we can do so. By putting ice out on the deck, giving them something to play with, or even filling those buckets there with colder water, or even hiding pieces of seafood in that ice, really stimulates our otters and uses their natural instincts to kind of be able to express that and really be able to keep those natural instincts nice and sharp even though they're on exhibit. Now I'm sure that watching these awesome southern sea otters does definitely bring a smile to your face, because I know it definitely does for me. And now these sea otters are not only being an amazing ambassador for their species while they're on exhibit, but they're also doing really amazing things behind the scenes as well. Now, the otters that we're looking at right now on exhibit are deemed non-releasable by California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And that means that either due to medical or behavioral reasons, these otters need ongoing human care. And that's why they're here with us at the aquarium. But we also have an amazing, very unique sea otter rescue and rehabilitation program here at the aquarium. And that's where we see wild otters of all shapes and sizes that might need a little bit of assistance from us. And when we see all those otters come in, sometimes we'll get some orphans and abandoned pups. And that's really where our resident adult female otters are able to step in. They're able to step into a foster or surrogate mom role, teaching that pup everything they need to know to be a good, successful wild otter. Or they're able to release that pup back out into the wild, which positively contributes to the sea otter population. And now this is really important because we almost didn't have the opportunity to see these amazing species today. In the 1800s, they were hunted extensively for their fur, and there were about 50 individuals that remained that completed the entire southern sea otter population. And there was a community in Big Sur, which is a little bit farther south than here, that came together and knew to keep that group of otters a secret from the fur traders. And because that community came together and took action then, we have the opportunity to see these sea otters in person here today. Now you saw that our animal care staff gave a really big handful of food and even some ice to our otters, and that's the signal of the very end of their training session. They'll be able to finish that food at their leisure over the next few moments, and then I'm sure they'll launch into some very cute grooming behaviors. But of course,